The men in my family have a rite of passage, as my father calls it. When a boy becomes a man, he travels across the country in my grandfather's car, alone, seeking his past. My grandfather had died long before I was born. So for me, it was a way to connect with this man I had never known, a way to understand my roots. To be honest, I think it was mostly a test, and I don't know if I passed it or not. The car itself was a relic, a 1968 Ford Falcon, a big machine made of steel, seaweed green, and chrome. The interior smelled of old vinyl, cold pipe tobacco, and a faintly metallic, sad scent like an old book. No global positioning system Bluetooth or screens at all. Just a roaring engine, a ship-sized steering wheel, and an old radio with a crackling dashboard speaker. I left 2 weeks ago, with an old map, Johnny, spread out on the passenger seat. The first days on the road were incredible. It was just me, the asphalt, and old rock and roll on the radio. It was almost time for me to take it to the next level and get on the famous road. Looking at the map, I saw it, a big red line marking a highway that ran straight for about 300 kilometers through what looked like a thick and vast national park. The road leading there was pretty unremarkable. There was just a forest green sign pointing to a 2-lane road, which vanished behind tall fir trees. The air became cooler, the sunlight grew dimmer, trying to filter through the needles of the overhanging trees. For 10 minutes I saw no other cars. The road was deserted, like a ribbon unrolling through nature. That's when the radio started acting up. At first, it was just a bit of interference, the familiar hiss of a signal lost because of the distance and the geography of the place. But then, through the interference, a voice rose up. It was clearly a presenter's voice. His tone was serious and urgent. He discussed the embargo and Cuba tensions. The broadcast lasted about 30 seconds before interference returned. At the time, I found it strange. I turned the radio knob, but only heard the usual crackling from the speakers. A few kilometers later, it happened again. A lively, cheerful jingle for a soda brand that was familiar to me because I had heard my parents talk about it once. However, that brand hadn't been sold since the 1970s. I decided it was just an atmospheric pulse. I had heard that in remote places, radio waves could get trapped in the ionosphere, and that under the right conditions, some radios could manage to pick them up. I recently discovered a strange fact, but the broadcasts kept being heard and even started to change. They were becoming more intimate. For example, I heard a quiet conversation between two lovers. Their words were full of tenderness. I also heard a mother lovingly humming a lullaby to her child. It moved me so much that I had tears in my eyes. There was also a heated conversation between two men. Their voices seemed to be full of rage, which made it hard for me to understand exactly what was being said. These were no longer regular broadcasts, it was something else. The atmosphere in the car had shifted me from a state of curiosity to a feeling of deep unease. As for the road, it kept going, still as empty and identical. Then, at one point, I finally saw something, a building. It was clearly an old, run-down diner. The signs and paint were chipped, and all the windows had been boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for over 50 years. As I passed by it, I heard the radio again. It wasn't a voice this time, but a cacophony of sound. The sounds of cutlery clinking on ceramic plates, the gentle noise of a grill, quiet conversations, and the bright, friendly voice of a waitress asking, "What will you have, sir?" It was so real, so vivid, I could almost smell the coffee. It lasted for the 10 seconds it took me to pass the diner. Then it disappeared, replaced again by the crackling of the radio. My heart was racing. This phenomenon was anything but natural. A few kilometers later, I saw a large clearing with a massive oak tree and twisted branches in the center. The moment I passed by, the radio turned on again. This time, I could hear the sound of a child laughing, an innocent and joyful laugh, accompanied by the rhythmic creaking of a swing with every movement. I looked at the tree, but there was no swing, just a thick branch with nothing hanging from it. Then the realization hit me right in the face. The radio wasn't picking up random frequencies from the sky. It was picking them up from the ground, from the road itself. It was replaying moments, memories that had happened in the exact places I was passing through. That desolate stretch of road was a kind of recording, and this car, my grandfather's car, was what allowed me to listen to it. A morbid curiosity, much stronger than my fear, then overwhelmed me. I started experimenting. I slowed the car down as much as possible as I drove past a half-destroyed barn. The radio started broadcasting the frantic and desperate voice of a man praying and begging, while thunder rumbled all around him. The storm wasn't really there. The sky above me was slightly grey, but in the car, I could almost feel the vibrations of the storm in my bones. So I completely stopped the car, and the sound of the man praying suddenly stopped. I backed up a few meters, and the prayer could be heard again. The man was in the middle of a sentence. I was able to control everything the radio was transmitting. It was as if I could navigate through the timeline of that place. The initial wonder started to turn into something much darker. Not all the memories were happy. Anyway, they couldn't be, not in front of me. The road curved sharply around a rocky ravine. A simple safety barrier, rusted by time, separated me from the void. As I approached, I felt my stomach tighten. I almost turned off the radio, but I couldn't. The interference gradually gave way to the shrill sound of tires screeching on wet pavement. It was the sharp telling sound of rubber losing its resistance, its grip. It was followed by the piercing scream of a woman, a howl of absolute terror, abruptly cut off by the sound of metal crashing against rock. And then, nothing more. The silence that followed was worse than the scream itself. Then I was overcome by a wave of cold. The feeling of imminent threat was no longer just in my head. It had become a physical sensation that passed through me, from the leather of the old seats, through the steering wheel, which I was gripping tightly. It wasn't just a recording. The emotions were real. The pain, the fear, the joy, everything was infused here, in this place. I needed to get out. Just for a minute, I parked my car on the side of the road, my hands trembling. I needed air to escape the claustrophobic intimacy of these ghosts. I turned off the ignition, and the silence that followed was a real relief. I sat there for a long moment trying to catch my breath. I glanced over the dashboard. Then my gaze shifted to the glove compartment. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe because I was looking for something to distract myself. I don't know. But inside, under a pile of old receipts and the tire pressure gauge, there was a small leather notebook. It was my grandfather's. His name was embossed in gold letters on the cover. I opened it and I started to read it. October 12, 1971. I started my rite of passage today, on a highway that cuts through an old forest. The map calls it Route 9. It really seems ancient. Strange things are happening here. The radio keeps picking up old signals, like some kind of echoes. I should come back through here. 15... October 1971. These aren't echoes, it's the road. I even gave it a name. The raw stuff. It holds on to things. Voices, moments from the past. I walked past old Mr. Miller's farm today, and I heard him yelling at his son, clear as day. Mr. Miller has been dead for 20 years. This road, it remembers. I kept flipping through the notebook. The entries grew more frequent and obsessive. He traveled this road regularly, listening to and cataloging the memories he found there. It was fascinating. But after a while, the tone of the entries began to change. His usually clear handwriting turned frantic and nearly unreadable. I kept reading the following pages. September 3rd, 1992. I was wrong. I was stupid. The road doesn't just replay past moments, it records them, it takes hold of them. Who was it last week? After a terrible argument with my wife, I felt angry and full of rage. And today, as I passed by the same place, days later, I heard it. I heard myself. My own words, my own anger. Echoing from the radio interference, it took a piece of me, it recorded my pain, and now it's playing it back. Every strong emotion, every peak of human experience, all of it stays imprinted. Here they feed the void. The last entry was written on a page that seemed to have been wet by drops of water or tears. September 5, 1992. It's our blood. It has to be. I found the old county records, the ones he keeps in the basement of the old church. This land wasn't empty before. It was a forest that belonged to a tribe. Our ancestors, when they settled in this valley, erased everything. There was a phrase that often appeared in the old letters I found. Get rid of them. It wasn't a treaty, it wasn't a sale, it was a slaughterhouse. Our lives are built on their graves, and this road cuts right through the very heart of their resting place, where they will be forever. It doesn't just replay the memories, it shows us their suffering, an endless loop of their final agony. It's a curse for us, our bloodline. And the car, that damn car, acts like an amplifier. This rite of passage is not about connecting with each other, but rather connecting us to them, to their suffering. The road requires a witness, someone descended from the line of usurpers. It asks us to listen. After reading that, I dropped the journal. Everything I had just read chilled me to the bone. The rite of passage, once seen as a link to the past, was just a web of lies. It was a beautiful story, hiding a horrible truth. I glanced in the rearview mirror. The road seemed to shimmer behind me, making the forest look like some kind of mirage. The car, which had been running perfectly until then, started making a strange metallic noise before the engine suddenly stopped. Then, the radio came back to life, but this time, it wasn't playing a memory. It was a deep, unsettling humming sound. That's when I saw them in the rearview mirror, far behind me, where the road met the horizon. Figures started to appear, dozens of them, then quickly they became hundreds. They rode dark horses, upright and menacing beneath the gray sky. Then, the figures started moving toward me at a supernatural speed. They were screaming. But the sound wasn't from the radio anymore. It was in the air, like a heart filled with rage and pain. It was speaking in a language I didn't know, and yet I understood it perfectly. My gaze turned to the sides of the road toward the forest I thought was empty. It wasn't empty anymore. Other shadows were gradually appearing from behind the trees. Women, children, older people. Their bodies were twisted and mutilated. On their faces, they had an expression of constant agony. And of course, they were looking at me. They weren't just ghosts, but accusations. They raised their spectral hands and reached toward me, their mouths distorted. In a silent scream that I could feel in my soul, the complete opposite of my own scream, which was deep and guttural. I started the car again while praying. Luckily, the engine roared. I pressed the accelerator, and the old Falcon skidded on the gravel before finally gripping the road. I ran away as fast as I could. While the army of ghostly horsemen was dangerously closing in on me, the agonized faces of dead people passed by along my windows. The road seemed to stretch on forever. The car was shaking. As I pushed it to its absolute limit, the humming coming from the radio grew louder, more intense, and it resonated painfully in my skull. Then, after what felt like an eternity, I finally saw a sign. It was modern, and it pointed to a highway that was not far from there, the end of the place my grandfather had called the Hollow. When I crossed that invisible line, everything suddenly stopped. The figures on horseback disappeared, and so did the one in the forest, and the humming of the radio was replaced by a deafening silence. My body was shaking so violently that I had trouble driving the car, so I kept going for 2 kilometers before coming to a complete stop. I sat there, in the car, with only the sound of my breathing breaking the silence that had enveloped me. Then the radio turned on one last time. It was an old man's voice, carrying an ancient, profound weariness, a voice I never heard when he was alive, yet knew perfectly. It was my grandfather's. Now you know, you carry it too. The road remembers, the road always remembers, and one day, my boy, for one of us, one from our lineage, it will no longer be enough to simply listen. One day, it will demand its payment. The radio went silent, leaving me alone again. But I know I'm not truly alone. I can now feel this cold weight in my soul. The rite of passage has been completed. I have connected with my ancestors, and now I too am chained to their crimes. I have become the witness to their sins, waiting for the day when the road decides that it's my turn to become a host to these memories.